Welcome everybody to today's Creators Live. My name is Bryan and this is our 2-year anniversary episode. So we're gonna do a lot of cool stuff today, and let's get right into it. You guys know the drill. If you don't have your cameras on, go ahead and put them on so we can have that face-to-face, that interaction, and so that we can deliver the maximum value for you as we do this show. The whole point of me being here is to deliver that value. That's the magic word. We've been really hammering you guys with that ever since we got started with this show, and I want to make sure that you soak up all the juicy little nuggets of information that I have to offer you guys. So we're going to get into it. So let's see, I've got my laptop connected here, so that's the Bryan Mitbo you see in the chat there. We got a Mauricio in there, Suresh, Thiz Latin, we got Daniel, Kyle, Ara, Angie, and Amon. Please turn on those cameras if you can, if you have them. And thank you for joining us on Instagram. We're going to be doing a little bit of simulcasting today. So we're going to get right into it. If you get that invitation to become a panelist, accept that. That's how you're able to turn on your video and interact with us, interact with me specifically. So let's start with some wins, everybody. Let's hear some wins. Do we have any volunteers to start out? Raise your hand. All right, Daniel, first off the rip. Let's hear it, Mr. Daniel.
Hey, good afternoon, y'all. Glad to be here again. So I'll be retiring military 15 months, but we just got contractors, civilian contractors back in our facility where we work on the helicopters. Those guys have a general manager, a guy that's in charge of their whole company. He's going to have between 26 and 28 locations nationwide or worldwide, really, by the end of this year, and he has asked me to do their shirts for them, which includes t-shirts, which have DTF, DTG on them, and some polos that are going to have embroidery, which my wife will take care of that. So we're pretty stoked about that. He's talking about 80 to 100 per shirts per location per year. So huge one. I hope we get it.
Amazing. That sounds like a huge account. Congratulations. Awesome stuff. All right, any other volunteers before I start picking on folks? And as people filter in here, please turn on your cameras so we can have that face-to-face. Okay, I don't see any other hands raised, so I'm going to go ahead and start calling on people. Kyle Shropshire. Oh, you know what? We have Valerie Williams. Go ahead, Valerie. Let's hear from you. Do you have your camera? There she is.
Hi, so I'm excited. I finally got my first big win.
Ooh.
So I just landed an order for 100 shirts, and I'm so excited about it.
Awesome. Tell us more. What kind of shirts? Is it one side, multiple? Give us all the details. You know, we're all pretty techie here, so you can share the nitty-gritty.
Okay, so it is a garage that is local, and they I don't have all of these sizes yet. He's going to buy in bulk for his shop, but the shirt, what we're working on now is getting the specific shirt that the staff likes wearing. And so he was very familiar with direct to garment. He shared with me he was using another lady that went south. So anyway, I was glad that he called me. And also that my advertising is working, because he said that when he Googled, I was almost like the only person that came up. So I'm excited about that.
Amazing.
Yes.
I think that's a win in and of itself. That search engine optimization stuff can get real tricky. Yeah. So awesome work. I'm so happy to hear that. Let's give a round of applause for that. Thank you for sharing, Valerie. Awesome. We got some really good wins starting off our 2-year anniversary episode. Let's see. Any other volunteers for some wins? We got Ron joining a little bit late. We'll give him a little bit. I'm sure he's got some cool wins to share. Yasser, do you have a win that you'd like to share today? I know I'm putting you on the spot. Hang on, hold on. You got to unmute yourself, sir. We want to hear every word.
Here we go. I said, yeah, you love to do that, right?
I really do. I like it. Putting you on the spot's a little pleasure in my life.
Yes. Hi, Michael. How you doing? Well, we have wins every day. Today's win is that I just learned that our forehead eye stitch is on its way to us very soon, and we're so excited to add that to our lineup. So I'm working on some packaging for that.
Awesome. You guys heard it here first. We're gonna start carrying the forehead eye stitch. That's some cool breaking news. Thank you for that. I wasn't even trying to probe you for that. That's cool. Cool. Awesome stuff. Let's hear one more. You know what? I see someone I've been talking to a lot in the past couple of days, Mr. Juan Vicente. Do you mind sharing a win that you've had in the last week or so with the group?
Hey, what's going on, Bryan?
Howdy. Thank you for joining today.
Great. I'm just, I actually got my machine yesterday, and I'm actually putting it together before my training tomorrow. So that's a win right there.
Amazing.
Nice. Look at that. There you go.
So he got the Omni DTF, so he's assembling the little stand for it currently. Awesome.
All right.
So glad you
Glad to
took
see
the
you
time
got
to join us
the
today.
stand today, Juan. The new
Yeah,
stand.
I gotta say, I gotta say that so far it's so good with the customer service. I'm very pleased. As I had an issue with my delivery yesterday with the legs, and I was afraid it was gonna delay my training, but you guys overnighted the legs, and I'm here putting it together, and I'm getting ready. So I appreciate that, Yasser. I really do.
Absolutely. Teamwork.
Thank you. Yes,
Love
sir.
it. All right. Okay. So, being that this is the 2-year anniversary episode. Oh, and you know what? We have some other news to share of some equipment arriving. Michael and Yvonne, do you want to share? I just saw your little chat here.
Yeah, we got our embroidery machine on Monday.
The iStitch has arrived. Woo! So I think the group will be waiting with bated breath on your review of it, given your guys' experience in the embroidery industry thus far already.
Yes. As soon as we have a little bit of time here, hopefully in the next couple days, we'll be playing with it.
Amazing.
You know, if Yvonne was there, she probably would have got the forehead now that we have the forehead.
Yeah.
She'll probably order that too.
No.
All right. Okay. And another familiar face, Eli, is joining us. Let's get one more win and then we'll get into it. Mr. Eli, you got a win to share with us today?
Yeah, I mean, I got an order coming in a by the 10th at least. I mean, things are pretty slow right now, but I'm not pushing for things to be fast right now. If you know me, you know I'm all over the place, and so I've got 4 different businesses right now that I'm trying to run simultaneously. So, you know, doing what I can, trying to get to that benchmark where we can get some more machines and have some people hired to do it all for me.
Amazing. Like Edgar always likes to say, you're waiting for that opportunity to fire yourself from the production team.
Amen.
Love it. Okay, so being that this is our 2-year anniversary, I wanted to take things back to its roots and go over the basics of our bread and butter Freejet 330TX and 330TX Plus models. With the new machines that have come out, there's a lot of hype, and I think a lot of folks are overlooking the potential that this equipment has. A lot of you utilize mainly the Freejet machines, and I'm sure you can back me up in saying this is some versatile equipment where the newer stuff that we've launched is a little bit more specialized. So I wanted to go ahead and highlight all the different kinds of things that this equipment can really do, because it'll do a lot. It'll do a pretty wide variety of prints in and of itself in a very high quality. So we're going to go through that, and we can use this as an opportunity for any Freejet Q&A if you guys have questions about the equipment while we're at it, between, process and instructional steps. So to start out, I want to get a poll. Can I see a show of hands? Who here has the Freejet already? Let's see. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. My list is flipping around all the time. 8. Okay, so 8. I'm counting Ron, 9. So we've got about 10 of you in here out of roughly 40. Okay, so wow, we have a pretty good turnout today. So for those of you who are new, welcome. This is our 2-year anniversary, so we're going over the basics of this machine. So let's get into it. Let's put a fresh shirt on here. So for today's basically demonstration of the equipment, we're going to be using some shirts that are already pre-treated. In the coming days, or rather in the coming weeks, I'm going to go over other things that this equipment can do besides standard t-shirts. But I thought a good place to start is by talking about, the main thing that people typically get this equipment for. Who here started out their business just printing t-shirts? Can I see another show of hands on that? Okay, we got Eli. Okay, so it looks like a majority of you started just printing t-shirts, and over time you've added other things because the equipment can do other things. Is that a correct assumption? Let's see, I'm going to have to start calling on some of you specifically so I can get some actual answers. All right, let's call on. Let's see. Since I called on Eli last, I'm gonna call on him again. Eli, while we get this going, tell us a little bit about how you got started into DTG in the first place.
So I was working for a guy who does land development actually, and he ended up buying a Freejet from someone and just said, I see a lot of potential in you. I want you to just build a business from the ground up. Here's this machine. Here's everything to get started and make it work, basically. And so that's exactly what I did. We started with DTG, and then I realized how awesome DTF is. And so we got into that. So, we can pretty much print on anything. This is printed with the DTF. And I mean, I'm printing on a lot of stuff, and it helps with my other businesses because I can brand shirts really easily for my other businesses. So that's how we started, and we can print on basically any fabric now thanks to the DTF.
Awesome, glad to hear it. So you started with the t-shirts and you branched out. I see, you mentioned the hats. What other kinds of things are you applying DTG onto? We'll start with DTG, and then let's talk about DTF next.
Okay, well, we actually haven't used DTG since we started using DTF.
I've been hearing that a lot, yeah.
Yeah, I printed one shirt, which was already pre-treated, and it was just for a sample for a company, and that's it. Other than that, we've only done DTF. It's just easier, and I personally like a more vibrant print rather than getting a print that feels like it's not there. So, doing the DTF really provides that vibrancy.
Awesome. So let's move on to the DTF. What sorts of things besides t-shirts and hats are you putting the DTF onto?
We've done some canvas bags. That was interesting because it really doesn't like to stick to canvas, so we ended up having to do cold peel, which that worked fine. So now I have cold peel and hot peel. I usually just use hot, but there's some shirts that just don't. There's some fabrics that just don't like that hot peel, and so you have to wait for it to cool off, which is no problem. But once we got that cold peel, it worked just fine on those canvas bags. I'm trying to think what else we print on. I mean, we done sweatpants and all that, any type of garment. We print on like rain jackets and all that, polyester, uh, reflective vests. I mean, you can do anything.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. I do want to take a second to tell you guys about what we've got going here right now. So we're using our branded Freejet graphics. I'm sure 99% of you guys have seen our Eagle graphic. A lot of you guys, if you requested samples before you purchased the equipment, it would have been one of these images. And I think picking some high quality graphics is really important when you're getting into this industry, and those of you who have equipment can attest to the importance of quality in, quality out. If you start with a subpar graphic, you're going to get a subpar result. But when you put a good graphic in, you're going to get some really nice prints out of it. So today, one observation that I have with this particular image, there's a lot of black in the graphic, which is not the same tone of black as what my shirt is. So I've elected to use the dark cotton environment rather than the black cotton environment. And what that means is that the black environments will tell the computer and the printer, the shirt is black, I don't need to print any black ink. So for graphics like this, it can kind of mute the darker tones of the image. And when you tell it it's a dark shirt, that says it's not black and it's not white, so we need to print all the different colors of ink. And that's how you get some nice rich tones like what you're going to see here when this is finished. Another thing that we're doing here is adding a little bit of highlight. So highlight is applied in the areas of the graphic where it's white, and it'll remain white. So this will print during the color pass typically. You can set it to print on its own layer channel, and it'll come back and put a little bit more white. One thing that you need to adjust in order to determine where it's putting the white, you need to adjust the fuzziness. So for my purposes today, I've set the fuzziness to 15, and what that tells it is that the colors on here which are white will get more white ink. The higher value you put in there, the more it'll creep into the very light yellow and other brighter colors, and it'll put white highlight on there. So having too high of a value on the fuzziness is generally not ideal. So 15 is typically as high as I go. Some people prefer 10. It kind of depends on who trained you, and that'll determine what your preference is. But 15 is typically where I'll set it, and I'll set the percentage of the highlight at 80. You do want to be careful of putting the highlight too high, because what will happen there is the other colors can bleed into the white, or the white will bleed out of its print area. So that's something to keep in mind here. And once this is finished, I'll go ahead and show you guys. Almost done. For the white underbase and for the color layer, I've left it as is, so no adjustments there. I know for the more basic graphics, some folks prefer to, are we going to use the close-up cam for this one? Right here? Yeah. Back it up a little. Let me back it up. I know for some folks on more basic images, they do prefer to use a large dot size for the white underbase. And what that will do is use larger droplets of ink. I'm going to set this to the side here. And I'm going to show it to you again fresh with a new graphic. So as I'm laying this on here, one thing that I want to draw your attention to is how I'm positioning the shirt. on the platen. So I'm gonna take this over here. So I have the collar pretty much as close as I can get it to the edge. Oh, which one? I'm gonna get this as close to the edge as I can without it being on my print surface. That way, when I do my margins in the software, it'll be basically 1-to-1 rather than my 2-inch margin plus the space between the collar and the edge of the platen. Does anyone have questions about that, or did I describe that well? Everyone clear on what I mean by that? Let's see, Daniel Orr is asking, did you still use white underbase choke on the print? Yes, I did. So we'll talk about that once we get into the software a little bit more on what that's doing. And so another technique that I'm using here is when I go to tuck it in, I'm starting from the center of both sides at the same time, and I'm tucking towards the edges. That way, when I get to the corners, it's not going to be all bunched up on me. So you do the center, and then you work towards the edges. If you go end to end, by the time you get over here, you're going to have a little bunch of fabric in the corner. And what that can do is get you a head strike. I want to give one person some bonus points if they can tell me accurately what a head strike is. First one to speak up, go.
When your print head rubs against whatever it is you're printing and smears that ink.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you, sir. Okay, so when your print head touches and rubs on your print surface, doesn't have to be pre-treated, doesn't even have to be a shirt in order for it to be a head strike. Just whenever that nozzle plate of your print head makes contact with something it's not supposed to, that's a head strike. The nozzle plate is where all the ink comes out, and it's super delicate. If you've ever looked at it, it's got hundreds of tiny holes where the ink sprays out, and it's so delicate that even light contact with materials can damage it. And it's going to be even worse if that is a pre-treated material. I don't know if any of you guys have ever done this. If you take a little bit of pre-treatment and a little bit of white ink and you mix it in a container that will never get in contact with the machine, so like just in like a disposable cup, just put a little bit of white ink, a little bit of pre-treat, and watch what happens pretty much instantly. It'll solidify into kind of a cottage cheese consistency. And when you get a head strike, that's what's happening inside the print head. So that's why pre-treated garments, when you get a head strike, are particularly bad, because that'll happen in there. So after you get a head strike, it's really important you follow our head strike recovery procedure. We do have that on the knowledge base. So we did just drop a link to the knowledge base for the DTF environments. On the knowledge base, there's also head strike instructions that you can find. For those of you who have our equipment, how many of you have the knowledge base bookmarked? You gotta have it. It is super useful when it's those sorts of on-demand or as-needed questions that are too infrequent for you to have already learned just by experience. That's where I want you to go first. And it's really easy. There's a little search bar, so you just search keywords, and it'll pull up generally an article that describes what you need to do for most things. Some things, it won't be on there, but most things, it will. If it's not on there, you contact me, you contact your sales rep, or you open a support ticket, and that's how you would get help from there. Okay, so we have our shirt loaded. Next thing we need to do is adjust our table height. Technically, I don't need to because I just printed a shirt of the same kind, and the height is already adjusted, but we're gonna go over it again just to make sure that everybody's clear on what needs to be happening. I do see a question before we get to that. Michael's asking, what is a good solution for printing on a polo with the elevated buttons? So if I was going to print on, let's say, my polo that I'm wearing here, typically you're going to be printing the left chest area, or you're going to be printing the back if it's maybe like a work shirt or something. If you're printing on the back, you would want the threadable adult platen, and you would just dress it on, and the nice flat backside will be up on the top surface, and then the buttons will be on the inside of the platen. If you're printing just left chest, you would use the chest platen. It'll just be a 6 by 6.5 inch square right here, and you just tuck it in, easy peasy. Nothing will change with your setup in the software. That's a great question, thank you. So we're gonna go ahead and adjust the height. So there's two different ways on the Freejet to adjust the height. If you have the DTF, you don't need to do any height adjustment. And if you have the i2, the adjustment will be done through the computer. And there's an auto scan feature in the driver. So what you would do, so you can press the down button until whatever you're printing on is below the height of the sensors. Can we get in real tight right here so they can see the sensors in case they've never seen them? Okay, so you'll see right here, this is your height sensor. You're gonna have another one right over here on the other side, and they work together to determine, it's just a little brake sensor. So when something's in the way, it says, okay, there's something there. And when there's nothing in the way, then it's, okay, the table needs to go up some more. So we put whatever we're printing on below the level of those sensors. If you need to, get down on eye level and make sure it's lower. Then you press and hold front until those sensors are in the middle of whatever you're printing on. If I'm using the chest platen to do a left chest print, I would put the sensors over the highest area of that platen. In most cases, you want to be printing on flat surfaces. So when I say on the highest area, if it's flat, you would just put it in the middle. Next, you're going to press and hold up until the table doesn't let you go up anymore. You can test that by just tapping up, and if nothing happens, then it's all the way up. If you have any doubt, drop it down, bring it back up. For those of you like Ron, Ron, do you mind tilting your camera up a little bit so we can see your lighting situation? So for those of you who can see how Ron has his lights, Ron, have you ever had any issues with height adjustment when you're doing the function rear, the automatic height adjustment?
I learned early on, and it stuck in my head that when I'm doing a height adjustment, that lid is closed, because I do have LED here, and LED out front in front of the second printer. So I make sure that lid stays closed so I don't have that issue.
Yeah, so let me explain to everyone else what exactly we're talking about. So when you have very strong overhead lights, what can happen is that the lights can overcome your little sensor here, and it'll allow the table to go up too high. So in the case of that, a common fix is just to do it with the lid closed. That's a good solution. But like me, a lot of you prefer with the lid open. And so if that's the case, you just need to kind of manage your lighting situation. So you have it all the way up, and then you can hit standby, and the gantry will go to the front. From here, we're ready to print. It's really important the order that you set things up in, especially when you're very new with the equipment. Always set up the printer first and then move to the computer. The reason for this is because, let's say I haven't done any of this yet. The height's not adjusted, nothing. I set up my computer and I hit print without thinking. You know, I'm on autopilot. I hit print. Now the printer is basically loaded and ready to go, and I have to do every step perfectly, because as soon as I send it to the front, it's going to start printing. If I need to correct anything, I have to do it before it gets to the front, which for those who are very solid on their steps, not really that big of a deal. But when you're still new and sometimes you forget a step or you skip a step, cut a corner, that can mean a head strike very easily. I made that mistake very early on, and so that's why I always make a point to explain that to you guys as well, so you can learn from my mistakes. All of this is you guys learning from my mistakes and my years of training experience. I know way too much about this machine than I would have ever liked to. So now we're gonna go over to Zoom. I'm gonna share my screen, and Mauricio is gonna yell at me once it's up on the screen. Okay, all right, so you guys can see my screen now. We're gonna go ahead and pull up another image. I'm gonna do the tiger. That's one of my favorite graphics. So we've got our tiger here. First step of any print setup will be the environment. You're gonna go to quality mode. For those of you who have different machines, you'll have different environments. Depending on if you installed it yourself or if a technician or the trainers installed it for you, they may have cleaned it up, or you'll just have everything. But what we're looking for today, since this is a Plus model, we're looking for the 330TX Plus quality mode. Then we have a bunch of options here. We have the black, dark, and white, and then white ink solid. So the white environments tell the computer we're printing on a white shirt. We don't need any white ink. So it'll just print the color layer and be done. For the black environments, it tells it this is a black shirt. We don't need to print any black ink. So it'll still do the white base, and it'll still do the color layer minus black ink. In some cases, this will be a little bit suboptimal, like we talked about before, if black ink would be used to enrich the colors of the graphic. Next is dark. So the dark environments tell it this is not a white or a black shirt, and we need to use all the different colors of ink. And then the white ink solid is meant for when you're just printing a graphic that's white ink. It'll do a heavier pass so that you don't have to do multiple prints over the same area to get a nice, solid, and vibrant white. With the advent of DTF, that environment is pretty underused nowadays, because DTF does that exact thing very, very well and very easily. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and do dark cotton. We're going to go ahead and size this down just a smidge. I just want to do a 12-inch print. This lock icon indicates that as I change one parameter, it'll keep it proportional. If this is unchecked, I can smush the image in the vertical or horizontal direction. Next, I want to do top center. And that's an important step to pay attention to. In the QRIP window here, I'm doing the position. There's another area that we'll get to next, which will show you a similar little grid. And it's entirely different, and it's related to something else. So we'll get to that. Another thing is when you're working with rotating a graphic. So let's say you're printing on a hoodie and you rotated the hoodie to tuck it in, like if those of you who attended our hoodie episode, you rotate the hoodie around so you have the hood on the control panel side. You would need to rotate your graphic. In that case, your top center would be left center, or depending on how you rotate it, it might be right center. So depending on how you load the graphic will determine which center to use. If you're doing the chest platen, Michael, you would be doing top center still, and you would just keep your graphic smaller than, your graphic plus your margins need to be smaller than 6 by 6.5 in that case. So today we're just doing top center, keep it easy. You have mirror and invert tools. If you're doing DTF on your Freejet, you need to make sure you click that mirror image if you don't already have your graphic mirrored out of Photoshop or out of your photo editor in general. Very rare will you ever use the invert image. I'm hard pressed to find a situation where that's been relevant. Can I see, has anyone ever used invert image for anything? Am I missing the functionality of this and where it would be useful? Edgar?
I used it,
Oh, who's used it? Matthew?
Matt. Yeah, I had a t-shirt that had I only had artwork in black
Mm.
on logo, so I inverted it and it printed it white.
Oh, awesome. Okay, that's a really good use for it. So it'll just take, if it's an all black graphic, you can switch it to white. Awesome. Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you guys still see my screen? Yeah. Okay, beautiful. Okay, so from here, thank you for sharing, Matthew. So we're gonna go to print setup. It's the little printer with the wrench, and you're gonna select your port. This is telling it which printer to send the job to. So if you have multiple Freejets connected to the same computer, sometimes this can be a little bit tricky. And for those of you who are asking, if you do have multiple Freejets, you can't send jobs to both at the same time through one RIP software. I think Ron can back me up in saying it's best to have either a machine that has a virtual machine and you load two separate versions of the RIP, or if you're less technical like myself, just two computers. That's the way to do it. Okay, so we have our port selected, and here we see that other grid that looks like our position for the graphic. So this is the position of the platen on the printer. It's really important that you do not click on this, because if you do, it's going to mess up the preset adjustments, and all of your stuff is going to be like 1/10 of an inch off. Next, we're going to go to properties, and here you can set your margins. So depending on how you loaded your graphic, you'll want to do a different value on the margins. My preference is typically 2 inches because that's about 4 fingers, and your my collar is loaded right there at the edge of the platen. So 2 inches is nice. For the screen printers, typically they go for the 2.5 inches. Some folks just like a different value on there, like it a little bit further down or a little bit further up. So that's up to your preference. We can click OK, OK again. And here we come to the highlight. We have fuzziness. I'm going to set that to 15. We already talked about what that did. And we have highlight generator. We have that on the fly. The only time you're going to really want to change this is for photos. For photos, you do not want any highlight. Highlight will make photos look really funky. It'll put a white layer on top of the color layer. So it ends up giving like an overexposed light gradient in that spot where otherwise you wouldn't want that. So we want on the fly, and I like to typically set this to 80. I find that on most of the graphics that that I've printed on onto pretty much any material, 80% is about the upper threshold that the material can stand. And that'll also depend on how dry it is in your print shop, how dry your garment is if it's freshly pre-treated, and it'll also be determined by how much pre-treat you have on it as well. So I like 80% there, and last but not least, we're going to add the choke. So image, add white underbase choke. If it doesn't let you add it, there's one of 2 options here. You've either already printed the job and it's down here in the queue and it doesn't have the choke, so it won't let you add it because it thinks, I've already printed it. You would have to delete it from the queue in order to add the choke. Alternatively, you've already added the choke and it's not going to let you add another one. So add white underbase choke, and you'll leave it at 2 pixels unless you have an extremely high resolution image. 2 pixels will be fine. So when I say extremely high res, you're looking at like 600 DPI plus, to the point where for most cases, those graphics will give you issues in the RIP anyway. It's more detail in that image than it's really worth. After about 300 DPI, you stop seeing the difference when it prints because of the resolutions that we're printing in. We have a question in chat. Let's see here. Is there another print option if you don't have the chest platen? So Valerie, if we're doing left chest printing, another option that you have is to tuck the adult platen as we did today. And instead of doing top center, you're going to do top right corner. That's the other way to do it. There's a little more guesswork involved, so I don't like to do it that way for most cases. Unless you really need to. Let's say you don't have the chest platen, you only need to do one. It's not really worth getting the chest platen for the amount of work that you would be using it for. You can just eyeball it. If you want, you can get some of that chalk they use when they're doing like sewing, embroidery type stuff, quilting. There's that fabric chalk, and you can use that to draw like a little square where you want the print to go, and you tuck that into the top right corner.
Will the setting work when printing film, the highlight setting?
Will the highlight settings work when printing to film? Yes. So when you're doing DTF, the highlight is still important. Now the way that the DTF prints turn out will be a little bit different. So I haven't tested highlight on photos on DTF. I haven't done a lot of photos with DTF. So that's something that you can test and maybe report back to us next week. Okay, so this print is ready to go. We're going to right click and do a print preview. Super important to do a print preview, especially while you're new, because if anything looks funky in the preview, it'll look funky when it prints. Or in some cases, it's just an indication that you set something up wrong. So let's say I have this too large, 15 inches. We can go print preview, and you see it's kind of gone off the page. So that's what doing the print preview is valuable for.
What about t-shirts with pockets? Your recommendations?
Okay, Maria is asking, what about t-shirts with pockets, and if I have any recommendations? So t-shirts with pockets can be a little bit tricky. Your easiest option is to do DTF. DTF is going to be 10 times easier than doing DTG onto a pocket area. Very commonly, the upper end of the pocket will kind of bubble up or stick up higher than everything else. And it's very easy to get a head strike because it's not going to be secured flat like everything else that you're used to printing on. So in the case of pockets, DTF is really the easiest and most surefire way to get a good print on it. That's actually a really great question. Whew, really great question. Thank you, Maria. Okay, so this is going to go ahead and do the white underbase, come back, do the color layer. I have it on the layer B setting on my control panel, so it doesn't wait for me to hit standby to come back. While you're new with the equipment, I highly recommend you leave it on the layer A setting. Everything becomes a little bit more deliberate, and you learn and you take a little bit more time to pay attention to each step as you go. Once you get used to what the printer will be doing, when it does it, why it does it, then layer B starts to make a little more sense. And you can kind of speed things up to an extent. But especially while you're new, I want each and every one of you guys to pay a lot of attention to how your white underbase should look. So when you have the final product and maybe it didn't turn out the way you wanted it to, you can think back and say, oh, well, the pre-treat looked good. I'm happy with how the pre-treat looked when I finished it, like the shirt wasn't crystallized, and you were paying enough attention that you know the white underbase looked really good, but it started looking a little bit weird when the color layer went down. Now you have a suspect of where to start. You would print a nozzle check, and the nozzle check will tell you, oh, one of your colors is, partially clogged on the nozzle check. So you do a couple of head cleanings, try again, and it gives you a point to start troubleshooting at. If you're just going through the process, not paying too much attention, your print comes off of the heat press and it looks bad, you're kind of out of luck. It's up to a handful of different options at that point if you haven't been paying attention each step of the way. Those of you who have done troubleshooting with me in the past, you'll know that if it's not something super obvious, I'll have you go back and I'll say, okay, I'm gonna have you pre-treat another shirt from start to finish, and I want you to take pictures for me after every step. So you're gonna do the pre-treat, take a picture of the shirt, load it onto the printer, take a picture, print the white underbase, take a picture, after the color, take a picture, and so on and so forth. And that way it's super easy because I don't have to be connected there and basically watching you do a shirt start to finish, especially because, you know, a lot of people, ourselves included, sometimes have difficulties with internet connection. And with photos, you don't have to worry about that. I can see everything in a very high resolution and take my time to look at it. There's no camera shake on the phone, nothing like that. So this is looking pretty good. I think in this case, I would want a little bit more pre-treat on this shirt. Or maybe I'll do a nozzle check after this and see how my white channels are looking. I think it's a little bit light on the white. That rhymes. Okay, I see another question here from Maria. Why does the underbase apply lighter where darker colors are in the dark environment? So the software by default will identify darker areas and apply a gradient of white underbase to kind of optimize your ink usage and keep costs low. So it'll put less white the darker the colors that are going on top will be, because those darker colors are already going to be dark. So when it puts black over it, it doesn't need a white underbase under black in most cases. Some people, they do prefer that. So there are settings for that. You would use the 330 TX settings even if you have a plus, and it'll work out very nicely. But in most cases, you do want to just leave it on the gradient mode, the default. Any other questions from you guys? I know we kind of talked about a lot of different things. A lot of it's pretty basic, but I know bringing it back to the basics is pretty important. Are we going to do camera number 2 here? Let me back up a little bit. There we go. And so one other thing I wanted to take the opportunity to talk about before we start to wrap it up here. Oh, let me show it to Instagram here. Sorry, I've been kind of ignoring you guys. Here you go, Instagram. What do you think of that? Looks pretty good. So when I was talking about this print earlier, just a couple seconds ago actually, I was talking to you guys about how I think it could use a little bit more white. And as you can see in the video, it looks quite good. I would expect once it's heat pressed, it'll look a little bit more muted because it's going from glossy to matte to dry, right? Wet to dry. But I would still count that as sellable. And there's a really big difference between perfect and sellable. A lot of you guys do strive for perfection, and I totally agree that perfection should be the goal, but that doesn't mean you can't sell that garment necessarily. A lot of the times, the average person is not going to notice a little speck of white ink that dripped slightly outside of the print area. They'll just think, oh, that must have been part of the graphic, or they won't even notice it to begin with. So there's a wide variety of cases where those will still be perfectly viable. And so I don't remember where I was going with that. I see another question here from Maria. I have a youth platen. What settings should I use for that one? I tried one time and I think my graphic was off to one side. Should it automatically center the design if I choose that platen in the settings? So let me take you back into the RIP software and we'll talk about that briefly. That is a really excellent question. Thank you, Maria. I think this is something that a lot of people mean to ask about, but maybe forget. When you're using other platens, you do not adjust the little palette size. I typically will use this drop-down list as a cheat sheet for the sizes of the different platens, but I leave it on the shirtboard standard. Unless you have custom environments which are paired to those different platen sizes, that's the only situation in which you would use a different platen size. All this is doing is restricting your maximum print area to the dimensions of your platen. So it prevents you from printing over the edge. So instead, let's say I'm using the chest platen. It's 6 by 6.5. What I'm gonna do is make sure my graphic, let's say, is 4 inches, and it's 6.5 inches tall. So I can give this a 1.5 inch margin, 1.25 inch margin, and that'll center my image on the platen. The smaller the platen, usually the easier the mental math, but ultimately it's not too hard of mental math to begin with. Or if you need to, you just use a calculator. But you can also use a little bit of creative loading of your garment so that you don't have to do any special margins or anything like that. So Maria, does that answer your question? Is that pretty straightforward? I'll take the silence as a yes. Okay, so let me stop sharing. Okay. Okay, so we have someone asking, does Ron only use the Freejet? Can he comment? So Ron currently is using 2 Freejet printers. Ron, you want to tell us why you haven't made the switch over to the DTF machines? I think he's busy with something. Okay, all right. So before we wrap it up, I did want to talk to you guys about our workshop that we're going to be doing here at OmniPrint HQ. We do have a virtual option. Are we prepared to drop that link in the chat, Mauricio?
Yes, I'm in just 1 second.
Awesome. So we're going to drop the link in the chat here so you guys can register, sign up. We're really excited to have everybody here in our office. We will be offering it virtually, but we do have, for those who come in person, we do have a VIP pass you can choose, and that pass will get you into a, Yasser, you want to talk to us a little bit about what the VIP situation is going to look like? So there's going to be a boat and dinner situation.
Yep. Absolutely. So it's a 3-day, guys, and it's you can basically, it's a workshop. If you click on the link, you'll see there's several topics: how to grow your business, how to manage your e-commerce. It just a ton of knowledge, ton of workshops for 2 days, and then on the 3rd day, that's the VIP. The 3-day event continues on for the 3rd day, and that's a networking event with influencer people in your business, in your industry, and it's going to be kind of a luncheon on a boat here in Newport Beach, and any money spent signing up for the events, whether it's the 2-day or the 3-day, gets credited back to you for any of your future orders or anything that you will need in the future. So it's really given back to you 100%. But it's worth looking into. I think you'll find the agenda impactful. Let me see here. I'd like to share my screen for a second, and I could show you real quick because the link is right here. So you guys see my screen? So here's your 3-day event, and you could see here basically a lot of the schedules, and once you register, you will be able to look at the calendar, look at every workshop, and I would love to see as many people, but of course, is going to be done here in our home office and on a boat. So we have to make sure that the quantity doesn't reach too high, otherwise the boat will not move. So that's kind of a thing here. So we're excited. Check it out and let us know, because we'd love to have you guys. There's going to be a ton of knowledge, and we want to see everybody here. It's going to be an exciting weekend. Can't wait for it.
Yeah, and I think you went over, I think, one of the most impactful details pretty quickly here, Yasser, is that the money you spend towards the event, you get that same value of store credit for your purchases. So whether that's towards if you're buying a new machine, or if you have our machine and you're just buying supplies. So next time you guys, in the next couple of days, if you're going to be placing an order for inks, for example, sign up for this and use that store credit to buy the inks. You know what I mean?
And for those who are now in California, it's about 67 degrees.
Yeah, we got real nice weather. So, okay, all right. Thank you guys for joining us on our 2-year, count it, 2-year anniversary. Spaces, I neglected to mention, spaces are filling up pretty fast for our in-person event. So if you're planning to come, make sure you sign up right away. Make sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms. So the YouTube, Facebook, our Facebook page, and if you have the equipment, we have our Facebook group. You know, there's always all kinds of good interactions on there. I see a lot of our regulars here in Creators Live giving a lot of great feedback and tips back into the community over there. So thank you guys who do that. Ron, Michael, and Victor, I've seen you guys in there. So appreciate it. And let's see, Instagram, make sure to follow us on our Instagram, and we will catch you guys next Wednesday, 2 p.m. Pacific. See ya. Bye, Instagram.